Well, let's get to chapter 6. Sign number 4 is in chapter 6. And just the first 14 verses, and this is what it says. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs. You see, this is all the way through the book. Sign, 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 sign. I mean, they saw the water to wine or heard about it. They heard about the nobleman's son, and now everybody knew this guy at Bethesda. And so everybody's starting to get the word, what Jesus is doing. Remember, he did a lot more than these. John only picked these for his book. He's doing them all the time. He is doing signs and powerful workings. But they saw all these things. And he performed on those who were diseased. Verse 3, and Jesus went up in the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Isn't it amazing? Jesus was never in a hurry. Did you know that? Jesus was never in a hurry. Isn't that kind of strange in our culture? We're always in a hurry. We're always, we've got to find more time-saving devices. We've got to, just hurry. We've got to drive faster, find a quicker route, or fly there. Jesus sat down. That's just so comforting. In the Passover, a feast of the Jews was near, and Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? Now, if you want a good study in the Bible, look at the questions of Jesus. Jesus asked a great number of questions. Never are they just kind of in the fly. He has a purpose for every question. See, he wanted Philip to start thinking about who he was. See, Philip quickly reverts to the human. And look at his answer. He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip said to him, now Philip was an accountant, 200 days' pay is not sufficient for them, that every one of them would have a little. He said, that's a whole year of 4-day work weeks. He says, a year's pay would not pay for all these people. We're talking about 30,000 people. And he says, so $30,000. He says, why, 30,000 loaves of bread wouldn't cover this group of people, their hunger. He was really, he'd been thinking about this. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, here's a lad. He has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. Well, what are those among so many? Now, there was a fellow, at least had a little bit of vision. He says, I found a lunch. And remember, and here's a principle, God likes to do things we can't figure out and can't mechanically get all, we get it all worked out on paper. He likes to do things we could never accomplish ourselves so that when he does them, he'll get all the credit. And so feeding 30,000 people, 5,000 men and their families, wives and children, families of 4 children and a wife and husband would make 30,000 people. To feed 30,000 people out of one child's lunch would get God all the credit. So, let's see what happens. Jesus said, make the people sit down. He was always very orderly. Jesus always did. In fact, we were just standing up on the we were on Bethesda, trying to figure out what hill they sat on. We were trying to see where you could fit 30,000 people in that little compact area. We found it. Remember? We decided where it was, and I know the Mausers, last year we found it with them. But we decided which hill it was. There's no marker, but we figured there's one hill that you could fit 30,000 people sitting in little groups. But so they sat down, and the men, verse 10, sat down, and the number was about 5,000. That's where we get there were 5,000 families. And Jesus took the loaves, so he held them in his hands, and when he had given thanks, and it says often when Christ prayed, he lifted his eyes toward heaven. So you can just see him, and this is, he's holding this food, and he looks up to God, and he gives thanks, and thanked the Father, and he distributed them to the disciples, and disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish, as much as they wanted. Verse 12, and when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost. So he was not wasteful. Good principle there too. Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments. Now why do you think 12? So each of those disciples who couldn't figure it out and said, we only 200, a whole year's pay wouldn't do this. And man, this little kid's lunch, they all had to walk home that night carrying this big hamper full of food. Isn't it doesn't he make them eat their words, and he really was teaching them. Well, the fragments of the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten, and those men, when they had seen the what? There it is. This is another one of those signs. Sign number 4, when they'd seen the sign Jesus did, they said, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." So they raised him a notch. First they thought he was a great party man. He made good wine. That was nice. Then they said, he is astounding. He healed the nobleman's son. Then he did the pool of Bethesda. Now they've moved him up to a great prophet. Now watch, he's going to do another one. Look at verse 15. This is when he really gets their attention. And by the way, here he's showing that he's the bread of God come into the world. That's what this feeding the 5,000 is. What Jesus was showing them was he was the bread of life, and he says, when you come with me, you'll never hunger. I mean, if I can make one little lunch, feed 30,000 people, you never need to worry about anything. I'm the bread of life. But look at verse 15. Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force and make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. He did not like promotion. He did not need anybody to promote him. He didn't need people to push him into any position. He was following very methodically God's plan, which should teach us something. Remember what the scriptures say? Promotion cometh neither from the east or the west, but from God. He raises up and puts down. Most people, the American philosophy is I'm going to pull myself up by my own, bootstraps. God says, no, I put up and I bring down. And trust me,